way we'll be able to get some content to you and keep going with the course the best that we can. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a quick overview of the first part of our reading for today, which is about the mind-body problem. So let's get to it. So we're moving into a new unit this week, and we're going to be talking about the mind-body problem and substance dualism. So here's the plan. First, we want to familiarize ourselves with what the mind-body problem is. This comic suggests it's your mind wants you to get up, your body doesn't want to move. That's not exactly what the mind-body problem is, but in a certain way, it's a version of it. So we're going to survey the possible positions. I'm going to stop this first video when I finish surveying the possible positions, and then I'm going to make a second video about substance dualism, so you'll be able to break it into chunks. So, what's the mind-body problem? Well, the textbook definition that Vaughan gives us says that the mind-body problem is the issue of what mental phenomena are. So, what is it to have thought? What is it to have a mind? And how should we think about the relationship between our minds and our thoughts and how they relate to the physical world? So you might begin to ask questions like, is the mind a material thing? Can our minds exist without our bodies? Can computers think? Or could your mind be, uploaded off of your physical body's brain and onto a computer? Now, it depends on which views you hold that's going to determine whether any of these views might be plausible to you. So, depending on which overall theory of the mind you adopt, you might or might not believe that your mind could be uploaded onto a computer. So why care? Well, this arguably is an inherently interesting question, and also it has really interesting and important ramifications for questions in religion, right? So it will make a difference to, say, whether it's possible for there to be an afterlife. So let's run through some of these main positions in the philosophy of mind. So first we have a view called substance dualism. Substance dualism is the notion that the mind and the body consist of two fundamentally different kinds of stuff or substances, the mind being non-physical stuff and the body being physical stuff. So the thought here is that minds and material things are fundamentally two different kinds of things. So just like, a dog and, a song are two completely different kinds of things, we might also think that the mind and the body are completely different kinds of things. So that's a view that you might find commonsensical, that your mind is completely unlike your body and is also independent of it. Others of you might be more persuaded by a view called materialism or physicalism. Now this is the view that every object and event in the world is physical. So the thought here is that insofar as minds exist, they are physical things. Just like a table is made up of atoms and particles. Well, minds are just more complicated arrangements of atoms and particles in motion. Then we find that there are a bunch of different versions of materialism. So logical behaviorism, identity theory, and functionalism are versions of the view that every object and event in the world is physical. So first we have logical behaviorism. And this is the view that mental states are simply dispositions to behave in a particular way in a certain circumstance. So, for instance, to be thirsty is just to do things that involve going for water. To be itchy is simply to do things like scratching, right? So that is logical behaviorism. Now, as Vaughan mentions in the book, sometimes we can use logical behaviorism as a way of explaining how minds and bodies relate to each other, but on the other hand, we get this problem, which is that it seems like there's more to being thirsty than simply being disposed to go for water, right? Instead, it might be something more like having a certain sensation, a certain kind of feeling. So if there's more than just dispositions to behave, then behaviorism might be false, but there are other materialistic theories. So another theory, one that a lot of materialists like, is the view that mental states are identical to physical brain states. So your mind and your brain are simply the same thing, and thoughts are simply certain configurations of matter in motion. So this view has a lot of proponents. This being philosophy, it also has a lot of critics, right? So one criticism of the identity theory is that if we knew the complete physical configuration of somebody's mind, then we would be able to know exactly what their thoughts were. But this seems implausible to some philosophers, right? They think that you could know every single possible thing about the physical configuration of someone's brain, but their thoughts would have to be something else, because thoughts are a fundamentally different kind of thing. So a last materialist view I want to tell you about, it's functionalism. Now this is the view that the mind is the functions that the brain performs. So one analogy that we often see when we talk about functionalism is that the body, the brain, is kind of like the hardware of a computer, right? It's like the hard drive and the CPU. But on the other hand, we would see that things like thoughts or thinking is more like software, right? Or it's like a program that's being run at the time. And that's sort of like the functioning of the mind. But those functionings are different than physical objects or events. Now, an interesting challenge for the functionalist, or at least an interesting implication of their view, is this thought that, well, if the mind is like software in the hardware that is our brain, we might start to think that, well, any thought-like functionings are thought, which means that computers are actually capable of thought. So, oh, come on. Oh, one sec, difficulties there. We're just going to finish up our survey of our possible views in philosophy of mind. So, substance dualism was the view that mind and body are two fundamentally different kinds of stuff, and that they exist completely independently of one another. Now, a separate view is called property dualism. and we're going to get to this later as we move through these various views. Property dualism is the view that mental properties are non-physical properties arising from, but aren't reducible to, physical properties. So the thought is that thought really is a fundamentally different kind of property than a physical property, like being 5 pounds or being in a certain location. And certain physical arrangements of properties give rise to mental properties, but mental properties aren't the same kind of thing. A last view that you want to know about is called Epiphenomenalism. So Epiphenomenalism is the notion that mental properties do not cause anything, but that they merely accompany physical processes. So this is a question that arises because we start to wonder how the mind and the body interact, right? So the thought is certain states of the brain give rise to thinking, but also certain thoughts, certain decisions can cause us to hit keys on our keyboards or bring our arms up. Epiphenomenalism is the strange view that mental things, mental properties, can't ever cause physical events or physical properties. So we're going to finish up there for now, and then I'm going to start another video in a moment about substance dualism. So keep watching along, and thanks for dealing with me through these technical difficulties.